Everyone, Mark Edwards here, along with Brad Allen and Jérôme Bérubé, and we're going to make another video and talk about some of the players that we have outside of our top 32. We've each picked 3 players, didn't really talk to each other about it at all until just for 2 minutes before we hit record here, make sure we didn't have any of the same players. So not a whole ton of prep time, but we figure we'd allow ourselves to talk about some guys that didn't make our top 32, but that we want to talk about a little bit. So I'm going to start here, and we're just going to rotate through. I'm going to talk about Charlie Cerrato, Penn State in the Big Ten. Listed at 6 feet. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a little bit under that, about 190 pounds. He's left shot center. So he's a regular 2005 birth date. So definitely a late bloomer. And I think in his case, if you look at his resume from his previous seasons, Youngstown last year, I believe, and the year before, he was a national team program member. They don't scream draft me. So everything he has done this year kind of stands on its own as far as what we did, as far as scouting him and deciding, where he fits into our ranking. He's really fearless forward. He'll play a really physical game, gets inside, not afraid to take puck to the net. I think he's smart enough and skilled enough to play with top players. So that means, he might be able to fit into the top 6. I think he'll be a fan favorite type of player. He's got that energy bunny type of look to him. I guess Energizer Bunny is becoming a little bit old. Like, there's going to be people watching this video who have no clue what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, it was an old commercial. But anyways, yeah. I really like the fact that he is extremely competitive and just willing to do the things it takes to get inside, to play in the dirty areas of the ice, the tough places to go. So yeah, he's the late bloomer that we have. Where do we have him on our list? 40th on our list. So that makes him, obviously the draft can vary a little bit each year, but that would probably be late second or a third rounder for us, depending on obviously where we're drafting in each round. Any of you guys want to chime in on Charlie?
Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest differences between him this season and what we evaluated in the previous seasons was the skating went up another notch and his playmaking went up another notch as well from what we've seen. So that's the main thing, is when you factor in the skating improvements, he became a lot more dynamic off the rush. And, he always had a lot of talent. So it's good to see him physically fill out. And as Mark said, very competitive player. Like, willing to do whatever it takes sometimes to make plays. And that's what you want when it comes to a depth center that can actually stick. So it's been a really good season, and we think he's very underrated.
Yeah, just going back to his. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jérôme. And then
I just want to add, I think he's another proof that you need to keep watching players, even though if they go undrafted 1 year, undrafted 2 year. Like, we watched him with the program, didn't get a lot of ice time there and didn't really show a whole lot. It was better at Youngstown last year, but we actually went back and watched some games from the USHL last season, and the biggest difference is the skating, as Brad mentioned. That's the big difference. And if you watch him with the program or even in Youngstown last year, I don't think anybody predicted he was going to be almost a point per game player at Penn State in his first year. So that's a really pleasant surprise for us. So, and he does play a very a style of play that might bring a lot of playoff value for the team that picks him. And so I just wanted to add it's not because you don't get drafted 1 year that it's over for you. Good scout will find players like that even in their second year of draft, being draft eligible, even third year sometime. We see it every year. They're but you really have to work hard to find those guys because nobody talks about them. Like nobody talked about this kid all year. So he's 40 on the list, and you start to see him getting being mentioned on the list now since we released our list. So looking forward to see what happens with him at the draft. He's a very interesting player for any team, I think.
Yeah, just real quick, I just mentioned, his prior resume wouldn't blow you away and scream draft me. So he had 12 goals last year in 45 games with 38 assists, which is nice. So he had 50 points in 45 games with Youngstown last year. And then he jumps in as a freshman to Penn State this year, 15 goals, 27 assists for 42 points in 38 games. And then I'll just quickly summarize what we had from as far as our ratings in our draft breakdown book. So we had him as a B grade, so that's a second, third round grade. Skating a 5.5, skills 6.5, compete 7.5, hockey sense 6.5, and we had a 6 ceiling and a 6 floor for him. Okay, those are all of 3 to 9 scale. Okay, so it's not like a 1 to 10. That is a 3 to 9 scale with all those ratings I just read off. So that's it for Charlie Cerrato. My first guy I wanted to mention. I had a hard time finding 3 players I really wanted to talk about outside of the top 32, which is just another sign of this being the weakest draft in some time, at least from my perspective. Anyway, we'll go on to Brad. Who's your first guy you want to talk about?
All right, Michal Svrcek, who is getting a lot of public recognition now, but back in November, we thought that there might be something cooking when we saw him internationally in Slovakia uniform. We went back to Brynäs there with Gustav Hillstrom, who's one of his teammates as well. So all eyes were on Brynäs for us this past season. And Svrcek, he checks a lot of boxes for a high-energy, small, diminutive winger that can actually translate, right? There's not many smaller, high-energy players that can actually make it, but there's some separating qualities that he actually shares with Cerrato. So the first is he's absolutely fearless. Like, this is an inside-driven player. He's an incredibly competitive player, way stronger than you would think given his size. And on top of that, pound for pound, you could argue the best motor in the class. It is right up there with Eklund and Bear. Depending on the game. At the SHL level, that's where he really took off and showcased, I think, what can be a translatable game. He can reverse hit his way out of corners. He can set up his teammates off the rush with trailing options or use his shot quality to threaten from distance. But again, he's also inside driven, so he's no problem going around the net, using his one-touch processing and using his slip and deception to be able to set up and do something around the net in a way that really makes him seem like he can translate. Good seam recognition, understands how goalies are attempting to integrate, knows how to manipulate goalies who are attempting to integrate. So there's a bit of a sixth sense to his offense when he's down low, which I think can really hold. And there is some Victor Arvidsson here who is there's a bias for me. We talked about overagers that are good draft picks. Victor Arvidsson is one of the best overage draft picks in the last 20 years. So he's not as good as Arvidsson, but we think he can play, and there is some Arvidsson-like elements that I think that can really end up being at least a depth energy player that really helps you in a playoff series. So we have him back a bit later than I was hoping for. You don't win every fight when it comes to the draft ranking, but I personally think he could be end of the second, early third round candidate, and I think he's one of the most underrated players in this draft.
Jerome, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think as far as his ranking goes, I think if he probably had a better showing at the U18, I think that would have been a bit easier to move him up, or at least be higher than where he is now. But he's a very easy player to like because his compete is always like at the top, and he plays hard. Even though he's not the biggest guy, it doesn't really matter for him. Like he goes all out all the time. He's got some skills too, and the skating is also like pretty good. So interesting player that maybe in 4 years maybe we're looking at him like starting to challenge in the NHL for playing a depth role to start his NHL career. So he's playing in Sweden, so he should play in the AHL next season. That's it's a good league for a young player to progress and get better.
All right, we'll let Jérôme keep talking, and he can talk about his first player that he's selected for this video.
Yeah, we go to Russia. Spoiler alert, I'll go to Russia 3 times. So my first player is Daniil Prokhorov. As far as we have him a bit lower at 46, and there's a few reasons why, but we do really enjoy watching him play. He's probably like a top 5 player as far as the entertaining value. 6'6", good skater, really good shot. He's got good hands. He plays physical. He's a bit mean. Really good puck protection game by him. One of the best puck protection game I've seen from any player, honestly, in this draft. Although, okay, the few things about him is like the playmaking does not exist with him. Like except if you play down low where you can make some like decent pass. Most of the time it's Brad, what's your nickname for him? Because I think it's the best nickname of any player in this draft.
Yeah, we call him 1v9, versus 9, because he doesn't have a team and he doesn't want a team. He'd rather not have them on the ice.
So yeah, he plays on his own basically. He doesn't really in transition. He doesn't pass the puck. The only time we kind of see a bit of playmaking out of him is down low, but in transition, like it's he's playing on his own. He doesn't use his teammate. He's just gonna do a lot of things on his own, rushing the puck, and at this level, like he can beat player one-on-one just with his speed, his power, his reach. But as he play against better players, it's not gonna be as easy for him. And actually, we did see that a bit in the MHL this season when his team played against some of the better teams. He was not as good. So he was good against like bad teams in the MHL. And for those who don't know, the difference is pretty huge between the bad teams in the MHL and the good teams. The good teams are really good, and the bad teams are really bad. So the difference in his play was very different here. But he's a unicorn. We just don't know if he's going to be able to figure it out. Everything he needs to work on. He needs to play more of a team game, and we don't know if he's gonna get to that. So maybe Mark or Brad can add a few things here. But so yeah, my first player was Daniil Prokhorov.
I'll chime in quick and then let Brad finish up. I'm glad you mentioned the down low stuff, because I think actually it was 3 of us were watching one time, and it was just like game after game how good he was down low and behind the net. It was like Gretzky's office, and he was working from there, and his protecting the puck was fantastic. So that's a trait that stood out. And then the other thing that stood out for me was just the sheer lack of desire to pass the puck. I think I already mentioned just about his assists, that most of them were accidents. It was quite comical. But in all seriousness, this kid is extremely talented. Jérôme pointed out all the fantastic traits. And if he can just start to learn to incorporate his teammates into his game, this could be a very productive player. Brad, do you want to finish up?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple really interesting things about this player. So for a player who doesn't pass the puck, occasionally he will flash like a dynamic passing play that you absolutely don't think he's capable of doing. It's usually against lower end competition though. So like specifically Capitan Stepino, which is a lower end team. He was exceptional with his playmaking occasionally in a couple of those games. And then when he moved up levels, as Jérôme discussed with Dynamo Shink, that's when he was attempting to pass, it would die down. He would end up turning pucks over. And I'm wondering if part of the reason that he plays the game he does is because he knows it will limit his turnover rates against top teams if he decides to use his giant frame and his handling and his cutting style more often. So maybe it's an over adaptation on his part. food for thought. So it's either that or he really just doesn't like anyone. We're sort of undecided. We don't really know. Mark brings up the Gretzky's office. Like he burns the office to the ground. He doesn't want to extract any mail out of his office. He wants everybody in it to burn. We've seen him legitimately get pinned by 2 to 3 separate players, still manage to work his way through checks, still end up with the puck, and still not look at a teammate that's directly in front of the net all alone, yelling at him, waiting for him. So this is a very bizarre player. The other thing I'll state that is, again, extremely unique for a player that has such a high rate of tunnel vision offensively and doesn't seem to be a good teammate in any capacity, definitely doesn't make his teammates better. He's very good 200-foot player. Like, some of the better defensive plays I've seen out of Russian players this draft were from him. Like, he has a good sixth sense of timing with his poke checks. His stick instincts are good. And he doesn't cherry pick as often as you would think. Like, when I first saw him, I was like, there's no way he's even going to go in his own zone. There's no chance. And it turns out he's actually willing to commit and positionally switch. And he actually is willing to help launch the transition and be the first man to pass the puck out of the zone occasionally. So it's extremely weird how this player operates.
He's not a dummy, Brad. So, like,
no,
he can't pass a puck, but, like, he does, like, his play away from the puck does indicate that he's not dumb, but, like, where's the playmaking?
Well, that's a great point, because the other part that's not dumb and why he might be able to translate, spatial awareness. He can carve through 3-4 players. That's one of the reasons it works. It's because he sees the ice correctly to do it. And that's not every player is built like that. In fact, one of the players we liked aggressively that maybe will translate, we'll see, Maxim Groshev. So Groshev, very fast, faster than Prokhorov on straight lines, but he didn't see the spacing like Prokhorov sees it. That's one of the differences between the two, and maybe why Prokhorov might be able to translate relative to Groshev.
All right, we'll close the book on him. I like the way you mentioned the Gretzky's office, because it's kind of like it's a hotel. He checks in but doesn't check out. So I'm going to talk about, imagine this, another Russian. I know, imagine that. Making Brad's day.
Be afraid, Carolina.
His name, I'm probably going to carve it, is Bogdan Pestretsov. Big 6'3", 210-pound defenseman. He's playing in the MHL. We have him ranked as a B prospect, so again, a second, third round grade, 36th on our list. So kind of in that same area as Cerrato I mentioned. Could be, a late second, an early third, depending on where you're picking. Really interesting player because he doesn't make a whole ton of mistakes. Very physical player. Uses his size. Even a little bit mean at times. I'm going to talk about another player. He's not as mean as him, but we'll get to him in a bit. But the skating for his size, I'll go over his traits in a second, the ratings for his traits. But his skating really stands out combined with that size. One thing I look at, I coach defensemen, so I'm always interested in their gap control. He closes gaps quickly with eyes, reach, and his skating ability. He's not afraid to use it. It's impressive. Does little things well. He'll support his partner. He'll get to the middle of the ice to give himself more options when he's moving pucks, which he does a fairly good job of doing. Just kind of like that steady Eddie type of player. And, when we talked about it, we thought he had a chance to be a second pairing guy, playing with a guy who maybe is just a little bit more offensive, maybe even a little bit better moving pucks. But this guy can be that steady presence, shutdown type of player. But he's not like a totally skillless, glassing out, shutdown physical guy. He can actually move pucks himself and plays a pretty smart game. You guys want to add? Brad, you want to chime in?
Sure. The huge thing with this player that everybody needs to know is that when you look at the top shutdown D in this class, and as we've discussed in previous segments, there's a ton of them. That's one of the actual strengths of this class. There's not many strengths in this class, but that's one of them. He actually has some of the best secondary offensive projection. So if you look at Max Senica, you look at Jacob Rombach, this kid has more to offer. there's more to offer than a lot of the other players. Like Mark, I remember we were watching him, and like he's capable of walking a line. He's capable of being able to pinch correctly and generate where you're like, oh, there's flashes here. And his shooting mechanics are actually not bad either. So he's one of those very interesting players where there's some untapped secondary offense despite having that insulating shutdown base. And that's why we have him ranked pretty aggressively, because there's a lot of shutdown D in this class, but they don't offer the same level of secondary offense when you project it out. He's also, reminds me of that Drowning Pool song, Bodies, because if he touches a player, they're on the ice. Like, this kid's a monster. He's very, very powerful. He falls in that Limatov category. We're one of the best athletes in this class. I don't know, Russian players, some of these kids are just freaks of nature. They're so strong. And this kid has that strength, and he needs it. His game is going to be defined about boxing out players, keeping the outside, finishing his checks, making life uncomfortable. He can do all those things. So he's for sure one of the biggest dark horses, I think, in this draft.
And he's not afraid to use that size. That's the nice thing about it. Sometimes it just frustrates you when you see the big guy who's just nice, and you're like, just don't be so nice. You can be nice off ice.
Talking about Lyndon Lakovic, Mark.
And Zonnon, which I thought someone might talk about. I don't know who's left here, but I don't think anybody's talking about him today. But anyways, yeah. So really solid player, as Brad mentioned. This just doing things on the blue line and finding shooting lanes and all things. I don't think he's at the level for power play in the NHL. But he's not. What I was trying to drive home is he's not skillless. He's able to play with some talented players and chip in and make smart plays and move pucks effectively and smartly, as opposed to just someone who's out there as can grind and stop the cycle and be physical. This guy can actually chip in and skate the puck a little bit and do some things. Jérôme, you want to chime in with some last words?
Not really. You guys have more viewings than me on this guy, so So what happens here is that if this guy is successful in the NHL, I'm not going to say a word, and if he's not, I will remind you guys about him, as we always do every year. So, so that's your guy.
Yeah, this was a surprising player because he just was so steady. It reminded me a little bit of when we were watching Braden Schneider. He just didn't make mental mistakes, you know. But this guy actually is a little bit better with the puck on his stick, I think, as far as, like I said, just handling the puck with a little bit more skill. Anyway, we'll move on to the next player, whoever that might be. And Brad, you're up.
Sure. Just to finish there, he's in Kresnaya's system too, which is a very good system in the NHL. We want players to be in good systems if we're going to put them on a list. The other factor is that he was injured, which is, I think, one of the reasons he went on the radar. So moving on, Michal Svrcek. I go from Svrcek to the other high-octane winger in this class from Sweden that I think is getting underrated, and that's Max Westergard. So there is some similarities. I didn't break down Svrcek's offensive game in too much detail, but the reason why is because I'll do a little contrast now with Westergard. So both of them are very good in transition off the rush. Svrcek has better handling rates and better slip triangle ability and multi-touch handling relative to Westergard. But Westergard is one of the best players in this entire class at having that sixth sense spatial awareness of when to come in as a trailing option and finding soft ice in tight and be able to just get that simple redirect type of goal. Very similar to Misa in that regard. Now, obviously not the same rate as Misa, but it's an exceptionally important skill for this player because, like Svrcek, they project to be complementary. Now, where they differentiate a little bit is they're both extremely good skaters, but they're very different. So Svrcek is a power skater, very good in open ice, power skating. And then when he gets himself in trouble, he actually kind of operates kind of like Nils Hoglander, where he uses the reverse hitting. He uses his smaller stature as a leverage advantage coming out of the corners because he has a smaller or lower center of gravity. So he can play around with bigger players and try to evade them from that perspective. Where Max Westergard has some of the best edge work and crossover mechanics in this entire class. From a mechanical perspective, very few players can match Westergard. So he's more evasive and elusive out of corners, where Svrcek is trying to use his power, and that's true in open ice as well. Svrcek, I think, is the smarter player. He's less error prone than Westergard, but Westergard is actually more of an agitator. This is where things get kind of interesting. In J20, when I was watching him in Frölunda, this was a player that was heavily, heavily targeted after whistles. And the reason why is because the kid can be a bit of a prick sometimes. He can slash hands. He can cross-check to the back of the neck after a whistle. He can say something that gets the opposing team to chase him down, and he's trying to turtle and skate away from him. And he can cause havoc from that perspective. So it gives him a secondary skill set, much which Svrcek has as well, but it's different. Svrcek's is that fearlessness and motor, where with Westergard is the agitation and speed component and evasiveness. The other difference is that Svrcek's a better shooter. Svrcek has the better shot quality. So Westergard has, again, to get close to that net. But when you're that gifted a skater and you're really good at slipping coverage, that's something that can translate for him. The other factor is Jérôme mentioned that Svrcek not great at the U18s. Absolutely agree. He's a complementary player. He can't be a driver for the most part. So he needed a running mate. He didn't have one. With Westergard, also not great internationally by any stretch. Jérôme, myself, watch a ton of them. We didn't have that much time for this player at times. However, just we all three of us have talked about this on different platforms over the years, and that's you have to watch right to the end. This is the youngest player in the class. So wanted to double check quickly because I found out he was in the SHL playoffs, which surprised me. I was expecting 2 minutes a game. That's usually what these kids get once games matter in the SHL. He was at 14 minutes a night. I'm like, hang on now, that doesn't make sense. That means he was doing things, I think. So I put them on, and I had to immediately message Jérôme. I'm like, Jérôme, we got a problem. This player is playing way better in structure. And Mark, I remember when we were trying to break down Elias Salamanson out of J20, we were kind of like, yeah, he's okay, but like his puck movement's not great. He makes mistakes. We watch him in the SHL together. We see him in structure, and what happens? We see a player that can translate. We move Salamanson back up. So far, so good. Salamanson looks like he's going to translate now. Westergard gave us that exact impression. So the second he was in structure and he was forced to play in a certain system and use his speed correctly, well, he was fantastic. So it's one of those situations where you take growth rate into consideration. One of the youngest players in the draft, and there's real potential for a depth, energy winger that can contribute in 25, 30 points, which is very similar to Svrcek, even though they operate a bit differently.
I'll say this. You mentioned the difference between playing G20 and SHL. Another Swede that was like this, and that was a high draft pick, but Simon Edvinsson in his draft year, his playing junior was like, some decision making was a bit all over the map, and he gets to the pro with more structure, and he looks fantastic. And then we were like, yeah, this guy is top 3, top 4 for us, like easy. It was the same case with this player. Watching him internationally this season, I was like, oh God, like there's not much there. Like I know he's the youngest player in the draft. The skating will be really, really good when he's 22, 23, but I don't see much else. And then Brad just sent me like a barrage of texts one morning, and then he's like, you need to watch him in the SHL playoff. And then I watched like most of those games in SHL. I was like, wow, I did not see that one coming. So he was really good, with more structure, and I was blown away, to be honest, by how he performed in the SHL playoffs. So I'll give credit to Brad. Brad did not quit on this player, and then he's not ranked. We have him, what is it, 50? 50 on the list. I don't know, he's not there anywhere else. We're pretty much the only service who has him, in that range. So
he's basically our Kieran Walton of this class. Kieran Walton is never ranked anywhere near as high as we had ranked him, and we're hoping it would work out. And that one's looking good so far. Hopefully, this is another.
Yeah, so he's super interesting, super underrated. I think if you only watch him internationally, you would be like, I don't really see it. Like he played fairly well in G20. He had like over a point per game, and like Brad mentioned, he's like annoying to play against too. So that's a good combo right there. And then the skating, the fact that he's the youngest player in the draft, I believe. And then, but it was mostly like his SHL playoff that really, at least for me, make me like really believe that, you know, he can play in the NHL one day in, you know, probably a third line, fourth line role at some point. So that's a bit of my quick take here on Max Westergard.
All right, it's interesting you mentioned the playing up. I remember a friend who he's actually a scout and he played in the league, but a lot more in the American Hockey League. And he talks about when he got into the NHL, how much easier it was to play because of the smarter players being around them and being when they're supposed to be. So he said it was actually easier than playing in the American Hockey League. And we've seen that with different prospects over the years, how they go down and up, and you know, and you also see it with just players that, right or wrong, feel like they should be up, whether it's, say, Sweden Junior up to the SHL or whatever, and they kind of sulk and go down to their junior league and don't even play up to their own potential because they're pissed off at where they're playing. We can debate whether that's right or wrong, but these are humans, not robots. So human nature is going to dictate some of that stuff. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my third player.
Wait, you forgot me. Forgot my second player.
Yeah, so I'm a good host.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's because you're babbling on so much about his guy that I forgot that it was.
Listen, I have to copy Brad a bit here. All right, my second player again. I go back to Russia, and actually a teammate of Prokhorov with his team is Roman Bausov, 6'6" defenseman, right defenseman. I was watching mostly Prokhorov, and then this kid kind of like appeared. I was like, "Who's this? Who's this 6'6" right D that skates well and can move pucks and looks pretty smart?" Well, that's Roman Bausov. Watching him like really quickly, I kind of like saw a lot of Igor Zamula in this game, but like in his profile, because he's very tall and also very lanky. So it's going to take a while before a bit like Zamula for him to reach the NHL. Zamula took like a while, like I think it was like undrafted and then signed by the Flyers, but I think it took like 5-6 years for him to really, you know, have like a full-time NHL role. And I think will be pretty much the same for Bausov if he makes it. Like it's not the kind of you know, player that will play at when he's 20 in the NHL. It's going to take some time. So, you know, whoever drafts him better be patient with him and let him, you know, develop his game, also develop his body, because he needs to, you know, add, you know, a lot of mass to his frame. Like he's 187 pounds, I think. So, you know, he should play around 215, 220. That's going to take some time. I don't think he's a power play guy, but I think he does move puck well out of his zone, good in transition, can also, you know, skate with the puck out of his zone, you know, get away from the forecheck. And defensively, I think he's fine. I wish he was a bit more physical, but he's so immature physically that you know, some of the battles that he might lose, he's just weak right now. So just have to be patient with that player. Let him, you know, get stronger. And I think there's enough want in his game. It's just sometimes he's just limited in what he can accomplish physically. But you know, I don't think he's a soft player or anything like that. He's just you know, there's some limitation with his lack of power in his body. So interesting player. Be patient with that player. Don't know. I would think about him as a draft. I would say based on where we have him, like he's probably more of a fourth round potential pick. So we have him 51 right after Westergard. So it's probably I would say like a more of a fourth round potential pick here. So interesting guy for me. It was really fun watching you know, him and Prokhorov this year, both like pretty both guys 6'6", on a team that has not really developed a ton of NHL talent in I would say the last decade. That was interesting, like to see that they have like, actually two legit, NHL prospect for me. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does, where he goes play, because now I think Russian can play in the CHL. So I wonder if he might come over a bit like Zamula did back in the day with the in the WHL. He did play for Calgary, the Calgary Hitmen, so it might be an option for him. But whatever, he's gonna have to. The team that drafts him will have to be patient. He's a really long-term project, and that might explain why he goes a bit later in the draft rather than second round. I think if you draft a kid in the second round, you probably want NHL result a lot faster than what you're going to get with that player. So, Brad, maybe you want to add a few things about Bausov here?
Sure, just very quickly. The first is that it's an all-time comp, folks. We have a battle of the comp secretly amongst our staff, and between Christopher's take of Mason West looking like Alexei Toropchenko and Igor Zamula looking like Bausov, I thought those were two of the best comps I've heard this season. Very similar to Igor Zamula in a ton of ways, as Jerome mentioned. The other thing I'll mention is we think he can translate because his exit playmaking rates are extremely similar to Theodore Hallquist's. And what that means is they're very similar to Max Hanika's. And we think that level is translatable. This is a player that understands first phase deception, doesn't rely on his frame right now because, as Jerome mentioned, very lanky. So if those exit playmaking rates hold, and we have seen a better aspect to him from a physicality perspective, like he's way more physical and engaged by the end of the season. He's starting to understand that aspect of the game. I mean, there's just not many of these types of players. He's 6'6" right shot defenseman that can skate, that thinks the game. They're very rare. He has a chance.
I'm going to finally get to my third guy here now.
Yes.
It is my turn.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk about David Bedkowski from the Owen Sun Attack in the OHL. That's the league I am located in. So I've seen him a little bit. Couldn't see him as much as I wanted to because he was hurt a large chunk of the year. He did return late in the year. Good for him to try and squeeze in some games in his draft year late. But he was playing, I'm told, was still a pretty, banged up hand, which obviously can be difficult for a defenseman to play with. Anyway, David is about pushing 6'5". He's about 220 pounds, right shot defenseman. We have him with a B grade. I think we have him 45th on our list. So again, that one, you're like probably the earliest would be a late second by the time we hit him on our list. And, more likely a third, and depending on the draft, could even slip into be maybe even our 4th round pick. Obviously, if he was still there. Just trying to drive home the point that when we have a player of 45, that doesn't mean that that's where we're going to take him at. He's our 45th player on our list. It's going to take some time to get to that 45th player. Anyway, David is physical. He's got some nastiness. His puck game, I think, is just good enough that he might be able to play in a third pairing in the NHL. If it was a little bit worse, he'd be down our list more, but it started to get a little bit better. His puck moving, some decision making, struggled a little bit with some forecheck pressure. That's a common thing, obviously. A little less time and space. He struggled a little bit more. Retrievals were fine for the most part. I thought he kind of protected the puck well and made, for the most part, some pretty good decisions with the puck. He wasn't coughing it up and just sending grenades all over the ice type of thing. So skating wise, again, probably just in the good category. Basically because his agility probably needs a little bit of a work. It's still a work in progress. He, up and down the ice, he'll look fine, moves around pretty good. Just his agility at times. So, for instance, a player going wide on him, it's not like he's getting beat all the time, but that's an area where maybe it could get a little bit better. But the things that you notice most are just his competitiveness, that he plays a little bit nasty, he'll fight. So kind of like a low ceiling but pretty high floor type of guy who's got the size, So again, just one of those guys that maybe come playoff time, if he's good enough to hold his own and not make mistakes, he can be effective and play that physical style hockey you want, and just smart enough, just barely skilled enough to do what you need. Skates good, not high end, but good enough. So yeah, player that I wish got to play all year, because his development this season was limited because of injury. So unfortunate for him that he didn't get more games under his belt to develop a little bit more this year. But a player that I liked last year in Oshawa, I thought there was potential. And then this year, with a Battle and Sound team, in the games he played in, which was about 35 or 36, something like that, he wasn't too bad. He made progress and did get better. Any of you guys want to chime in on David?
I guess I'll start quickly, and Brad, you can follow after it. So we often watching the NHL playoff, and we talk about defensemen that we have scouted before in the OHL, the Q, or the WHL, and we're like, I can't believe this guy is playing in the NHL playoff. And we compare to Bedkowski, and we're like, Bedkowski is better than those guys were when they were in junior. Like, I'm not going to name names, but some guys were like, there's no way this guy plays in the NHL. And then, they're playing in the NHL. A lot of them were sometimes like the puck skill, not good. Decision making is it's a really work in progress. And then, 5-6 years later, they are in the NHL and playing, which makes scouting really hard. But Bedkowski, we're looking at him. Obviously, the number of games is a bit lacking this year. But you look at his stats, you're like, oh, is he? And then we actually watch him play. And he's not bad with the puck. He knows what he's doing. He's much better than a lot of NHL defensemen that we have scouted in the past. At moving pucks and not turning the puck over that often. So that makes it an interesting pick for me, and I think maybe he's going to surprise some people where he goes in the draft, because 6'5", right D, skates, good enough. He has fine puck skills. I think that scream a second round pick to me, and so that's going to be interesting for me. It's just when you have done this for many years, you can compare to other guys that have made it. And other guys that have not made it, so it does help a bit with your process and how to rank a guy like Bedkowski, because we have seen guys like him in the past. Actually, some players were worse than him, and they are in the NHL. So it kind of gives you hope that Bedkowski can, become. He's not going to be a star, but he could be as Mark mentioned, like a third pairing defenseman with good playoff value. Brad?
I'll just quickly say that one of the most interesting aspects of him relative to some of these other shutdown defense we're talking about is that for being a bigger, heavier set kid, his pace of play is very good. Like, his conditioning is solid, especially considering he's coming off an injury where he wasn't playing the full season. So I really like the fact that he's got almost like a hybrid style of defense where he can be physical, but can also be a swarming style, which is very similar like Jacob Rombach, and how he closes very rapidly on players. So there's a multifaceted defensive skill set that gives him backup after backup, depending on the type of player that's coming at him in transition. So that's one of the reasons that we think he can translate. Yeah.
And I'll just chime in at the end here again. That one of the things I really like about him is that he knows what he is. It's hilarious to me at times when I talk to NHL scouts during the year or interview them myself, and you kind of get them to talk about their own game, and they just make NHL comparables that are complete opposites to who they are. But this kid, it's painfully obvious that he knows what he is. He knows how to play within his limitations and just be as good as he can with the tools that he has. So that's one of the reasons that I think he has a chance. And then to say a line that I've said about 430 times this year. In this draft, it's he's not a bad player to rank where we have him. Okay, so Brad, you're up with your third and final guy.
Okay, we're going real raw, but very interesting. So Blake Vanek. Yes, this is Thomas Vanek's son. Yeah, we can all collectively take a sigh here. We're getting up there in age. It's happening in real time. Blake Vanek does not play like his dad. Okay, this is not a kid with a tremendous amount of finishing ability. You're not going to see him fly on breakaways and do wind-up slap shots 5 feet away from the goalie and point at them as they score. So, however, this kid is one of the best open ice skaters in the draft. His toolkit is ridiculous, and he's just getting started. Some of the best dexterity out of any skater. His stride length is phenomenal, and he's one of those skaters that doesn't even need to move his feet very quickly to gain full power because he's that efficient and fluid out of the gate. So the acceleration and peak power output of this kid is phenomenal, and he's very young. So, I think what was his combine measurement, Scott? Was he 6'2.5"? Was the combine measurements, I think?
Just a sec.
Something like that. So we think he can get to 6'3", if he's getting to 6'3", 210 of muscle, that's going to really help our cause. So out of high school, Mark just discussed how Bedkowski understands his game, knows what he is, knows how to play within that, and that's what you want to see. So what happens with high school kids is sometimes that just doesn't occur because there's no structure there, right? So with Vanek, he doesn't understand what he is. It's all about trying to teach him what he can be. He does not understand just exactly how dominant he can be given his toolkit. However, when he got to the SHL and Chicago system, we were blown away with certain sequences that suggest a potential depth piece that can be extremely dangerous off the rush. Now, is he the most efficient when it comes to his shot selection this time? No. Does he have the highest end offensive instincts? Absolutely not. However, he can one-touch process. He can actually dictate through the middle. He can find teammates in transition. He can magnetize, draw in the middle of the ice with his explosiveness, and then find those lateral options and trailing options. We have seen him make sophisticated give-and-go sequences, cycle plays that set up and really help his teammates. It's interesting. I'm very intrigued to see what he'll look like relative to Jack Murtagh, relative to Kongsback Kleibo in the future here, because he has the potential to be something like that that can actually translate. So I'm sure a lot of you haven't really heard his name. Didn't get more than a cup of coffee up in the Chicago Seals system there. Didn't play a ton of minutes, limited minutes, but he did transfer to the WHL here. So we're going to see what he's all about if he can take off. But he's one for me where when you at least look at the toolkit and the potential, he at least has an elite attribute, which in this class, to get a kid with an elite attribute later in the draft, that's super rare in this class. So if you take that toolkit and it's pretty elite, and he can build on that, you got something to mold. You might get something down the line that can really help your team.
He's actually going to play in the WHL next season. Starting to see a bit more USHL kids are leaving for the CHL with the new CHL NCAA rule. Not a ton of viewings for me on this guy, but I watched him a bit at the end of the year. What was impressive was so he's 6'2" 1/4, and the skating. We were kind of blown away how good his skating was at that size, and he's still pretty raw. So that's a good base. That's a good base of a prospect, and then. This kid's got he's got some one-on-one skill that are very appealing for me. And, it happened a bit with Mason West for me, and it happened with Vanek too. I kind of like him more in the USHL than I did in high school. That makes it interesting for me. Pretty solid package here for Vanek. But he's an interesting guy. He's off to WHL. I think he's a really good mid-round pick that a team could maybe make a pretty good steal in the 4th, 5th round, depending where he goes. But he's definitely interesting.
Yeah, we've got him 68th on our list, C graded player, so that's a 4th to 7th rounder. NHL Central had him 146 for those curious. Standout quality is skating. You just like to make him. I think the main thing here is he's just really raw, and I think moving up to a higher level of competition is going to give him a chance to round out his game, because right now it's just he's an athlete, and now it's time to start develop some of the finer points of the game. Okay, so that was Brad's second. So this is it. So Brad, your third guy, or Jérôme, your third guy.
Yeah, I stay in Russia, and I go with a guy that I don't know if he's going to get drafted, but I really like his style of play. Leonid Levchenko, who plays for Omsk, which is a really good program in Russia. Usually every year they'll produce a few draft picks. So I watched him in the first half of the season. I like the way he played, but I just didn't think the skill level was there enough for me. And he was obviously not a very important guy for me to really pay too much attention at the start of the year, because I knew he was not going to be a high draft pick. So I was like, okay, I'll come back to him in the second half of the season. He's probably, if he's anything, he's probably a mid or late round pick potential. And then second half of the season, I start watching a bit more. And what struck me is, if you look at his stats, not really impressive. But when then you realize that he's playing about 11 minutes per game, and then he's almost half point per game, it's a bit of a sign that there's more here with that player. And we think next season, if he plays in the NHL, unless he comes over, but let's say he's back in the NHL, we think he's going to be close to a point per game player, because he's got some interesting. He's got decent size, 6 feet, 6'1". He skates well. He plays hard. He's annoying to play against. He's battle level. His energy level is always high up. My player comp for him was a bit like, okay, they're retired now, but a mix of like Antoine Roussel and Leo Komarov. So those type of like depth player that can be really annoying to play against, and they just keep going. They have they're a non-stop motor. So I thought he was an interesting pick late in the draft. Not really well known. The lack of ice time probably does help. Does not help him, but helps the fact that he's not really well known. But I don't know. I thought he was an interesting player for me, and I really enjoyed those type of players that play with like a tons of energy, and usually, even if the skill level is a bit lacking, sometimes for those guys. Mention Antoine Roussel. Like, I saw him playing junior. I would have never predicted him playing one game in the NHL, and then he played for 10 years. So, those guys tend to play better than their actual skill level might, tell you. So he has a lot of hard skill, high compete, interest. I think he's a pretty underrated player out of Russia. Not many players in Russia this year that are like super interesting, like that I would like fight anyone to draft them. Like maybe 5 or 6 for me this year. And late in the draft, I wouldn't hesitate drafting this kid. I think give him time in Russia with a good program with Omsk. I think he might end up being, obviously a depth player at the NHL level. I don't think he's going to be more than that, but I think he's an interesting pick if you have a late pick, because I don't think he's going to go. I don't even know if he's going to go in the draft. So if you have a 6th or 7th round pick on him, I think that's fine. I'm a believer in this player and that type of player, because they're tough to find, those high energy players that play fast and they think the game quickly. Like I think there's something with that player. Brad, do you have anything on Leonid Levchenko?
Well, to give you an idea of how unknown he is, I mean, Central doesn't have him listed, and we've never seen his name mentioned. Right? So it's very rare for both of those things to happen, but that's the case with this player. And one of the reasons why is he came up the MHL at the halfway point of the season, I believe, right, Jerome? So, he's playing the U18 level for a while there. So this is one of those late bloomer type of players as well from that perspective. Usually players we look at it out of Russia are already playing the MHL and they're -1, where this player is transferring over through the U18, Russia U18 systems. The other factor I'll state is like one of the better skaters in this class, I think, like incredibly gifted mechanically, very high pace of play, and absolutely fearless. And notice that every player we've discussed that's smaller that we're just talking about on this list, those are the attributes we absolutely look for. Like that's what you have to see. They have to be inside driven. They have to be fearless. They have to be relentless, and they have to be able to skate like the wind. That's the only way to be able to keep up in the modern game in transition, and they can do that.
Okay, with a little bit of time left, why don't we just talk about a few other players that were not ranked in our top 32, especially a couple guys just off the top of my head that are on a lot of top 32 lists. So Cameron Reid, Bill Zonnon. Have you talked about those guys at all at any other time? I don't think we really have. Right? Well, not recently during the year. So real quickly for me, we'll just do 30 seconds each, maybe on each guy here. For me, Zonnon, skilled. The points look great. The stats look great. My biggest issues are skating will look a lot better first half of the shift than when he gets a little bit tired. The skating looks a lot worse second half of the shift. And then this horrible trait, he's just too nice a kid. I think it's I will go into this a little bit in our draft book, but I find over all my years coaching, 19 years coaching, it's a difficult trait to change. If you're a really nice kid and you play nice on the ice, some kids are really nice kids and they turn into a real prick on the ice. Stefan Del Rivera, one of the nicest kids I was ever around. And then he got on the ice and he was an absolute asshole out there. So it happens. But when I have seen the kids that are nice kids and then they play nice, I haven't seen too many change. So it's not like we have him buried. We still have him 37th on our list. But that's my real quick take on Zonnon. Either you guys want to chime in on him?
Just quickly, I thought the compete was I would say good in the first half, and I don't know why in the second half of the season. I don't know if he saw some lists. He saw his name in the top 32. I think he was playing a really skilled game, but kind of like when the compete level, the toughness or whatever you want to call it, kind of like went away from him. And I think also his team in the second half had a lot of up and down. I think like January, February, they were really up and down. So I don't know. I don't really know what happened with him. I thought he was a bit better in the playoff, but Mark is right. Like he's a really nice kid. He's a great story. I read about him and his family, how they got into hockey. So it's a great story. I wish we all wish, I think, if he was a bit meaner, that would if he was a mean, tough son of a, you know what, good chance he'd be in the top 32 here. So that's for sure. Yeah. The skating is it's a weakness, but he gets, I think overall, he gets from point A to point B okay. But he's such a smart player. The playmaking is really good. And he reads the play well too, so it does help him a bit. Even though the skating is a bit a work in progress at this point.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that I do have a theory as to why he slowed down a little bit. So, our nickname for him on the staff was Stop Motion Zonnon, and it's because Zonnon is fast twitch, but his mechanics are incredibly rigid. He has very short stride, so he's powering up, constantly exploding, and that's going to decondition him quicker. But then he's not very efficient at all. So if you take that over the course of a season, I think in the second half he's going to start slowing down. And we've seen it in other players. So I think that might be one of the reasons that he slowed down. The other factor with this player that's very strange to me, we're talking about his compete, the nature of him. Like to Mark's point, does he finish his checks at the rate you want? Absolutely not. There's times where he'll straight up let up. Like he can be too kind. He could just run through players and doesn't do it. That said, He does play a swarming style of forecheck. So he'll use his range, he'll use his length, he will weigh on players, he will use a pace to try to drown them and overwhelm them. And I have seen players straight up freeze in front of him because of how overwhelming he can be from a presence perspective. And I bring up the presence because this is where things get, again, this draft is so weird. It's such a wonky class. For a player that keeps a high pace and has a high energy to him and plays the right way, plays a 200-foot game, there are full games that I've watched this season where he legitimately, it's almost like Malcolm Spence guys where you want them, they're 200-foot players and they can defend, but then for some reason they're in the background. You're waiting to find where they are. Where the heck have they gone in the game? And you wouldn't think that that's the case. Like they have enough talent in the Q and the O respectively where it makes some sense for them, some overlap, where with Carter Bear, he's always in the foreground, even with that pace. So that it was very strange for me to see why certain players in this class, like Zonnon, for some reason, seem to go invisible at times when he shouldn't. And the other point to Jérôme made, the playmaking, one of the most efficient short area passers in this draft. So a lot of how he operates is going to be off the cycle. And it's going to be with the short area playmaking where he can have support systems in place that operate properly, so he can find those options. It's when the stretch playmaking, that's where the rates start to die a bit. And that's kind of the unknown with the upside is occasionally he will flash a beautiful off-look dynamic, high-end lateral stretch pass to his teammate and set him up for a perfect catch and release or one-time option. But it wasn't very consistent. And to what we're talking about here, it died down towards the end of the season. So again, was there energy issues and why is he fading in the background, even though he's kind of quote unquote tenacious in a way, but then in other ways he's not. So that said, we like him. It's just, there's some limiting factors there.
Yeah, just last word, just on his skating. He's not a very good glider. There's not much glide in his skating, so that kind of adds on to what you were saying, and as an explanation of why, when I said to the second half of his shifts, the skating deteriorates a little bit. Okay, let's go Jack Nesbitt, another player that kind of, well. This is one of the players that drove me most crazy this year, trying to evaluate him. I think Bob just mentioned that he's had a scout say he's top 10, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know who that scout is. I was just talking to him about it 2 weeks ago. And I do not have him top 10. I like the player, but consistency was a bit of an issue for me. I am highest on him on our crew here, I believe. At least last I checked, I was. I had him right at the bottom of the first, but I will say that it wasn't with a whole lot of confidence. I like that he brings some toughness. We talked about Bedkowski. Nesbitt has also got some toughness in his game. He'll drop the gloves. That's rare at this point these days, so that's always a big positive. He's a huge kid. He's 6'4". He's probably pushing 190. He's 39th on our list, by the way, so he's not. It's not like we dropped him off a cliff or anything. But biggest thing for me was just the kind of like the ability to play make. I thought it was more basic passing ability. It was kind of like the see it, pass it, not showing off some sort of high-end vision. He can score, but a lot of stuff was in tight. And then, like I said, just the consistency and the skating is got to get better. I think it will. Most big guys it comes, but it's not at a level that you love currently. One of you guys want to chip in on him real quick?
Brad?
Sure. So, I completely agree with Mark about the playmaking rates. Like, if this was a higher end playmaker, I think we'd have a very different ranking of him. If he could pass the puck anything like Porter Martone, we'd be talking about a totally different spectrum of how we project. So, pretty simple passing plays, not a technical passer. Not a player that thinks 2 to 3 steps ahead in terms of his teammates' skating trajectory so he can set up backdoor options in advance. That's not how he thinks the game most of the time. Bigger body, very good down low, exceptional hand-eye coordination, good redirect ability. There's I can't remember his name off the top of my head. North Bay Battalion to Anaheim draft from the 3rd round last year. Ethan, his last name starts with a P. I can't remember, but very similar in terms of.
It's a hard name to pronounce, or I'd chime in.
Yeah, it is a hard name to pronounce, so I can't remember it. But that kid scored like 12 redirect goals this year and is very good net front and parking down there. And that's exactly the same situation with Nesbitt. That translates. That's the bread and butter. He's big, he's tenacious, he can be net front, he can screen, he can redirect, he can bring in jamming plays, and then he has enough sense to open up the ice for himself and make simplified passing plays when he needs to. Where I start to see more of the projection for the scout that has him higher is that by the end of the season, his handling rates did improve. He was starting to showcase that he can handle the puck in transition at a better rate than what I had seen previously. And I'll give him this. I'm not a big fan of his shot overall, but there was a couple of goals and shot attempts by the end of the season that I didn't think he had in him. And when you factor in growth rate, okay, catch and release should get better. His one-timer should get better, and his hands are definitely going to get a bit better than what we've seen this season when you factor in the 6'4" frame and how much he has to fill out. I can start seeing why that scout, and I'm sure some other teams are more intrigued because he does play the right way and he does play hard, and he's not a dumb player. But the other factor, Mark, I agree with 100%, is the skating is very limited. Like when we're talking projecting out with skating, there's 2 factors for us, right? The first is the mechanical base. His mechanics are very poor. Then you have to factor in the power output to compensate long-term for some of those mechanics, right? That's kind of how we have to do it. Now with giant players, he's not giant, he's very big. With very big players, you do give him some benefit of the doubt. We do think his stride will elongate to a degree. But as of right now, his stride's even shorter than Bill Zonnon's. Bill Zonnon's biggest weakness in his stride is how short it is. And Nesbitt might have the shortest stride in this draft. So there's definitely some limiting factors there in transitional hockey. And as everybody who's watching this knows, coming out of the playoffs, oh man, so much of it's generated through transitional play. And look at the pace, right? So that's where Nesbitt might have a lot of difficulties if things don't work out from a developmental perspective physically.
Just quickly on my end, that's a player I had difficulty this year. Well, not difficulty. I saw his name, being mentioned pretty high up, and I just didn't see it. I saw, for most of the year, I saw a guy that could be like a 4th line center with some, toughness, and I just didn't think the skill level was all that impressive for me. I'll give him credit, as Brad mentioned. By the end of the year, I thought it was a bit better. So maybe if the skating improve, if the playmaking improve, some of his shooting improve a bit, maybe then end up being a third line center. That could have happened. Overall this season, I try to, there's every year there's some players you try really hard to like more and you just can't do it. So that's Will Moore was one, and then Jack Nesbitt was one in the OHL where I just couldn't get there. We'll see, I guess, on this case.
Okay, Cameron Reid, Kitchener. We'll try and go faster. Okay, we'll get through a few more players. We'll go faster. Cameron Reid, Kitchener. For me, you can play on my junior team any day of the week. Ridiculous skater, one of the best in this draft class. Defending got better at the beginning of the year. I didn't even think he was defending well. But to kind of just put a real quick bow on it for me is I just don't think at his size, at his current defending ability, even though it did improve, I just don't think he's dynamic enough. I don't think he brings the offense every game. Sometimes you don't notice him, which is fine. He can be, just have a solid game. But I think at his size now for the NHL, and we've seen it with the teams drafting, you just want that size defense to be more dynamic. Once in a while he'll flash it, but for the most part, he can just be like a great skating stay-at-home guy at times. You guys want to chime in real quick on him? We'll move to a different player.
Yeah, real quick. I don't think his offense is special enough. I don't think his defense is. I mean, at this moment, I don't think it's special enough. So he's kind of like what are you going to be at the NHL level? Are you like Jordan Harris 2.0, like a guy who, yes, he can skate, above average smart, but does not have enough offense. And defensively, he does have, limitations. So is that what Cameron Reid will be? Maybe a better version of Jordan Harris. I thought, to be fair, I thought Jordan Harris would be much better in the NHL. But his move to Columbus didn't really work out. But anyway, that's not the point. I think I see Cameron Reid will play in the NHL because of the skating, but the rest, I don't know. Like I don't know what's his role on NHL team. Like unless the defense gets really good, that will be because I don't think the offense will be there. So his defense will have to be like really, really good, but I still think there's some limitation here by him. So I don't know. Not someone I was really excited about this year.
Yeah, I'll follow up. Mark mentioned not dynamic enough. Jérôme suggesting more of a puck mover instead of an offensive defenseman. So one thing I did to try to figure out exactly where the offense is put him up against Jordan Spence, who was a Q prospect who plays in LA system. And Spence, you look at his production here, 25, 30 points, power play 2, depending on the defensive structure there, who's there and who's out. Spence has a better shot at the same age. Spence had a better sense of timing at the same age. So, you factor that in. This is the thing about this player. He can skate like the wind, and you love the transitional upside, and you love the fact he can get in front of pucks before he has to defend too. That's something I think maybe we should bring up, is that he is good at anticipating neutral zone exit playmaking and getting out in front of options so that he can strip and steal pucks and start immediately going back the other way in transition. So he does have that side to him that will help him when he has to, instead of having to defend, he gets to do that instead, right? So he won't have to defend as often when he does that. But when he hits the offensive line, this is the biggest difference, I think, for how other people view him publicly relative to us. When he's looking to set up his passing plays, if he is under pressure, he has difficulty recognizing the trajectory of his teammates under that pressure. He makes a ton of blind passes that do not hit the mark. That's one of the biggest distinctions between him and Denton Matejchuk, for instance, as an example. And then when you look at his shot, again, he's under Spence, but let's break down another player that's probably higher end, and Axel Sandin Pellikka. Pellikka has a better release point, better mechanics, and better seam recognition. So you watch him in full flight, you watch his highlights, you're going to think he's an offensive defenseman. If you watch full games and you see the air rates pile up and you see that the sense isn't as high end when it comes to the offensive instincts, then we start thinking, okay, he's for sure a puck mover, because the puck movement is good. Like he can retrieve, he can exit under pressure, he can definitely move the puck up the ice and skate the puck when there's no options. So that's why we refer to him as more like, as Jérôme said, a Harris type of prospect, which we think he is.
Thanks, Brad. That's Brad's version of a quick add-on chime in. Okay. Did you guys have any guys in mind? You just want to do real quick hitters for Brad?
Do you want to do Mason West, Brad?
We can do Mason West for sure. I think Mason West is a great one for us to do. Yeah, a lot of intrigue. Do you want me to start off?
Yeah, start off.
Oh, yeah, going. Okay, so Mason West is a freak athlete, absolute freak athlete, dual athlete. So he's also a football player. Maybe we'll get Mark to touch on that because Mark actually watches football. So with West, you're talking about a 6'6" kid with an osprey wingspan who's pretty dexterous, very nimble, with phenomenal crossover mechanics relative to his age and size. He's one of the younger players in this draft, but my goodness, there's a lot of dexterity in his legs. Very, very nimble out of the gate. Can get up to speed very quickly. Now, the straight line is one we project out more because you factor in the size and you factor in the athleticism. The stride isn't that long yet. However, we think that once that core gets developed, okay, and he gets a stronger posterior chain so he can stay upright and on posture more often, the stride depth will come. And if the stride depth comes like we think it will, then he can use his speed and transition at will with his range, because again, he's an osprey. So really, that's where Christopher brings in the Alexei Toropchenko comparison. I think it makes a ton of sense, because like Alexei Toropchenko, Mason West game is going to be predicated off the speed and transition, pressurizing defense, backing them up, and then finding options or getting to that net front area where he can try to shoot the puck. One thing that's interesting about this player, Mark mentioned, like we like players that showcase the ability to recognize their strengths and weaknesses or have player comparisons that make sense. Admittedly, Mason West thinks his best strength is his shot. I would respectfully disagree with that. There's a lot of shots that we've seen this year, the mechanically under, that show very little in the way of shot quality. Don't get me wrong, if you look at his highlight reel, it scores some beautiful goals, but it does take him time to set them up. But with growth rate, that could go up another level. And if that goes up another level, then maybe that changes the projection entirely. But I really think right now it's more speed and playmaking and using the back of the net and finding that low to high options and high danger options in transition that's going to really separate him. The other factor that's fascinating about him is that although he's not a full-time hockey player, he actually does a lot of experimental work on the ice coming from high school to USHL. And so, for instance, he's a massive kid, doesn't really know how to hit too well yet, not an overly tenacious player, but he does some Cronwall style reverse hip checking, and he doesn't do it to obliterate the player. He does it instead to actually obtain inside positioning so he can use his skating and length to his advantage to get to the loose pucks faster. So it's interesting to me that for a kid who's not fully adapted to hockey yet and hasn't fully committed, to see him show some nuance and show some next level experimentation. There is limitations here though, and the biggest one for us, or for myself, for sure, is that under pressure he can have difficulty finding his options in the right amount of time. Now, part of that could be the fact that he had to adapt to USHL, and he was better in the USHL than we expected, for sure. That was very surprising to us, almost like Blake Vanek that Jérôme mentioned there, where when you see him in high school and you see him in the USHL, it's two separate players. Like, we really preferred this player once he got to the USHL. He showed a lot more upside.
Yeah, I agree with Brad. I'm not too crazy about his shooting skills. I like his playmaking better, but he's so raw. Like, even like you mentioned, like even his physical game is a bit awkward when you watch him. So, I mean, you're not drafting him for now. You're drafting him for in 5 years. So it's going to take some time. He's going back to Fargo next year after his football season. With his high school, but then he's going to Michigan State, which is like one of the top program in college hockey the last few years. It's going to be interesting to see him at Michigan State in 2 years. But whoever drafts him, be patient. It's going to take a while, but maybe in 5 years, you're going to have a good player on your end. But it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I like the player. I liked watching the USHL stuff better. High school drives me a bit crazy, to be honest. And I'll just, in the interest of time, I'll just fast forward to the football stuff. I originally reached out to a friend of mine who's kind of really on top of all the Minnesota stuff. So he had told me that the football schools that contacted him were more down in the level of the MAC schools and stuff like that. I follow football, both college and the NFL, quite a bit, so I was curious about this, to be honest. And then late, like right around combine time, so it might have just been made up rumors, that sort of stuff, to try and knock back his draft stock a little bit. I started hearing that some bigger schools like the actual Michigan and that level of school was getting interested in him, which would change the whole story, or at least possibly change the whole story, because while NIL money for hockey is in the $100,000, $125,000, $50,000 range, in football, if it's a school that wants their guy, we're talking multiple millions. So if I put myself in his shoes, it would be difficult to pass up guaranteed multiple millions in pursuit of hockey. Again, this is not fact. This is just stuff I heard late. It didn't impact our ranking. We went with it that he has chosen hockey, but I thought I'd mention it was some interesting info I got late. And again, sometimes this stuff is just thrown out there and made as fact to try and unfortunately drop a player's draft stock so a team could, scoop them up where they might not be able to otherwise. I hate hearing this stuff. It drives me crazy. So that's why I wanted to mention it as not fact at all. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But as my best info is that it is far from fact. Okay, so that's West. Any other guys on your mind?
Yeah.
Can we talk, Brad? Can we talk about Ivan Ryabkin?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great one to do. Yeah, a lot of people are asking us about that player. That's a big one for sure.
Okay, well, I'll start. I'll try to do it quickly, Mark. So, I mean, this guy was a top 5 ranked player for us last year. He had more points last year at 16 than Michkov had, that Demidov had. So he was a center. He looked really good last year. Start the year this year, didn't play his best hockey. Couldn't score a goal to save his life. But the playmaking was good. And then he found a way to get away from Russia and then move to the USHL. And then the opposite happened. He started scoring more goals, but then his assists, his playmaking value was not as good as it was in the MHL. So really weird player. Didn't look in the best physical condition that we saw. And that really affect his game, mainly his skating. His skating looked, pretty bad from the get-go. And watching him last year, I didn't think his skating was going to be an issue. So, last year we never know if those data are correct or not. But he was 170 pounds, and then this year he's 200 pounds. So don't know what to believe. Maybe he was not 170 last year, but it did look like that on the ice. We love his physicality. He plays like an asshole on the ice. He's really physical. But then the skating, the pace, the stamina, it's all really, below average for us. There's a limit of what we like the physicality, of course, and we know he has talent, but at some point we just had to make a decision on him, and we would be surprised if it turns out that he's a NHLer. He will need a major turnaround in the offseason, this upcoming offseason, to turn around, because he did get his points in the USHL, almost, I think, a point per game or close to it. But if you actually watch the games, there was a lot of question mark. And I think quickly, I'll finish with this. I think maybe one thing we overrated with him was his hockey sense. Yes, the playmaking was really good, but there's some really bad decision coming from him. Just with his playmaking, he was we like to call it the hope play. He's the master of it. He thinks he can make any type of pass, any type of play. He thinks he can make them, which is good for your confidence, but you don't. A lot of those plays you're not successful at it. So one of the more bizarre player that we have ever scouted. So at this point, we're just not believer in him. It's a shame because he looked really good last year, but this year it's been kind of a nightmare really to watch him and try to project him, try to rank him. It's just been a pure headache for us. Brad?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. At the beginning of the season, if we use a time machine, go back and whisper in our former ears and say, listen, this is a dual threat power center who has better numbers than Michkov and Demidov, and you put him basically as a no draft, you would be like, what are you talking about? What the heck are you saying to us right now? That's not possible. Future self. What happened? Well, to Jerome's point, he comes over the USHL. He looks like a completely different player for mostly the wrong reasons, minus the scoring touch. And it comes down to the fact that he has so many junior habits in him. It's very similar to Carbonneau from that perspective for me. There's a whole lot of junior there. And then you have to factor in the off ice here, the Kaliev style of situation, where some kids, unfortunately, they're gifted a tremendous amount of talent, and they quote unquote don't get it. They don't know how to hone it. They don't understand what it means to have an opportunity to become something very special within their field. In this case, hockey, and there's a lackadaisical nature to this player, I would say. I'm sure Mark maybe touch on the interview situation, but when you're drafting for a real draft, you have to ask yourself, what happens when this kid gets $6 million a year? What happens to him? You have to ask yourself that. What happened when Evander Kane got a big contract, right? Everybody knew he was immature coming into the league, and everybody knew what Ryan Merkley was going to. That was a question we asked our staff. All of us were like, what happens when Ryan Merkley gets paid a whole lot of money in the NHL? And unfortunately, he didn't even get to that point because he was arguably the most immature player that I think I've ever scouted. And that's where Ryabkin falls in this category. You have all the talent, you have all the skill, and admittedly, he does have some will. He's a proximity hitter, so he won't go after you too often because the skating's not good enough to do it. But if you go near him, he'll hit you, and he'll fight you, and he'll get nasty with you. But if you stay out of the side of his range, he won't touch you. That said, like, you can have all those things, but if you don't have the mental characteristics to become a pro, your career is over before it begins. And this happens every year with a player or two. This one's become a bit more public, but believe me when I say there has been other players that we haven't talked about behind the scenes where all bets are off. But it just hasn't been discussed publicly, so we don't do it either. But that's the situation with this player, and it's a shame.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, as you guys have already pretty much covered. But for me, I actually really enjoyed watching him play. So it was really strange to enjoy watching him play. But then when it comes time to project him for the NHL, there's just too many reasons to drop him. Jérôme, you mentioned the weight. I mean, he was 210 at the combine at 5'11". I think that's one of the biggest reasons when you're watching his skating last year to this year. It was really one of my biggest issues with him was the way he was moving around on the ice. He had a little bit of stuff I like. He had like some nasty in him to the point almost being dirty, which, to a limit I'm fine with. He did hit people. He's got some skill, but when it came to the interviews, oh my God, I heard more details about his interviews than really anyone in quite a few years, and his answers, some of them I wish I could share. I guess it's a bit of a tease, but I was laughing my ass off at some of his answers. Good on you, kid, for just saying what you wanted to say. Yeah, so just to wrap it up on this guy, he's a C-rated player. We've got him 65th on our list, and I think we've just about, kind of beaten a dead horse here on covering him. Yeah. Okay, we're getting to over the hour and a half mark at this point, so you got one more guy I want to talk about. Brad, what about if you want to go just yourself quickly, because I don't want to take the time for us to chime in. What about, did you ever talk about Barnhill?
No, we haven't talked about Barnhill. I did want to get one for Jay Brad in there. Jay Brad was asking for one in there. So I'll cover Jay Brad's quick, and then I'll move to Barnhill for you. So Jay Brad, our WHL scout, high on Hayden Paupanekis, who does have very interesting untapped potential, 6'5", 220-pound center, who has some skill and can skate. So that base is certainly enticing. There are definitely teams that are very interested in attempting to mold that. The problem is there's a wide range and spectrum of ability and outcomes depending on the game and the consistency rates and the mental makeup. So in some games, he looks more like a Kevin Stenlund style of player, where he has a lot of potential and this ends up a fourth liner that you don't really ever discuss and leaves the league and doesn't really have high impact rates ever. But then there's aspects of him that look more like Nick Paul, not as tenacious as Paul, but some aspects are similar. And if he can become something like that, then you might have a steal depending on where he falls in the draft. So very perplexing player, though. Sometimes he takes shifts off. Sometimes you think he doesn't have enough sense, but then he'll throw a beautiful backhand pass through multiple layers and show eyes in the back of his head and goes right to the tape. You're like, what? Ow, I didn't think that you had that. Then you look at his shot. He has an excellent shot. He's a power play weapon. He can shoot in transition. He's dangerous on breakaways, and he's going to get breakaways because he has speed. The handling rates need to go up. That's where there are some issues. So with bigger, longer players at this stage in their careers, usually they're in that experimental mode and they don't know how to actually take advantage of the handling. So once he gets past his own shoulder play, once he gets past a certain range of proximity, usually his hand's dying. So he needs to learn how to use his small area handling more effectively in transition so he doesn't have pucks die on him as often. But there's potential. Look for him to be one of those players that might get taken a lot higher than some people might think, because again, 6'5" with skill, and who can play 200 per game occasionally and can skate. They don't in this draft. They don't grow on trees, right? So that's the player that Jay Brad is very high on. Wanted to touch on now. Moving from one massive center to a massive defenseman in Sean Barnhill. This is a player that Christopher was high on, and he kept watching him and said he was getting better by the end of the season. So the curve was heading in the right direction for us. He is a shutdown defenseman, but he is exceptionally mobile, and he is physically more developed than Jerome's dark horse there and Roman Bausov. So that's one of the fundamental differences between these two large insulators. Now, Bausov is probably the smarter player, I would argue, better exit playmaking, more deceptive, but Barnhill can use his skating. He's a more powerful person, more powerful skater, so he can use that to his advantage to be able to get the puck moving. And in his best performances for us, I thought his transitional upside was a bit untapped. Like, he showed the ability to be able to go through all three zones, find his lateral options, set up his teammates, and he's just getting started. And the defense started coming around, and he started playing a quieter game. He wasn't showing as many mistakes. He was prone to loud mistakes, which is kind of like Logan Hensler's issue. Some of these defensemen, they can play, they pretty clean hockey, but then they'll make a huge loud mistake. You're like, what the heck? How did that happen? With Barnhill, that was his situation. But by the end of the season, to Christopher's point, cleaner operator. So he, out of anything I think you take from what we've discussed today, look how many of our dark horses are massive shutdown, insulating defensemen with some secondary puck movement elements. That's this class. That's the class. And I know for some of you, that's not the sexiest thing to hear ever. Okay. It's not the, you wish they were all dynamic. You wish that everybody was like Kale McCarr. It would be a lot of fun. That's just not the way some drafts work. And these players, to Jerome's point earlier, when he talked about playoff hockey, these players really matter. The insulators are specialized, and specialization is the new NHL. You get the incredible dynamic offensive talents, you immediately insulate that talent. A lot of teams work that way, and there's a reason for it. It works. So that's Josh Barnhill's game. That's how he's going to translate it.
Sean Barnhill. Our scout's name is Christian, not Christopher.
Oh, 2 mistakes in a row. Doing great. What's the hour mark? I'm starting to break down here.
You are. You've had enough. Just quickly. So Barnhill's 43rd on our list, a B prospect, 6'5" and a quarter, 214, and Paupanekis 48th on our list. It's Hayden Paupanekis, Kelowna, 6'5", and he's 202, not 220. Brad said. Okay, so Christian is our scout, not Christopher, and it is Sean Barnhill, not whatever Barnhill Brad said. I love these little opportunities to give it to Brad, as you might have noticed. And I think we are 100 or an hour and 36 minutes. So that is enough for tonight. It is, what day is it? It's Tuesday night. This will be going on our website on Thursday. So when you are seeing this, we will see you again in a day for our live draft coverage of 4 hours. I got to find a way to get my setup here in a more comfortable room with a better seat. to get through 4 hours. Guys, any last words?
Enjoy the draft. We'll see you guys on Friday night.
Yeah.
Just thank you to everybody who is supporting us. It really means a lot to us. If you can like and subscribe to us, it will really help us. We're almost at the 1K mark. It's an important milestone for us to hit. And feel free to throw any of our videos to your friends and family that are into hockey. They're more in depth, and that's not for everybody. But if they like that style, this is for them.
And also, maybe Mark, before just thanks for everyone who bought our NHL Draft breakdown. We changed a bit, slightly the format this year, but I think the feedback has been really good, and I think a lot easier for us to make this book happen. Based on the change that we made, but I think for draft fans, I think people are really enjoying it this year. So it's still available on hockeyprospect.com. So if you don't have it and you want to take a look at it, it's go visit our website. It's all there.
Yeah, glad you reminded about the YouTube stuff. I always forget to try and pump and get people to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. We do respond to comments too. The guys were just telling me before we hit record here that Brad wrote an essay for a reply apparently this afternoon. So he writes like he talks. It's long. So if you respond and have a question, one of us will respond, and if Brad responds, grab a seat because it might be a long response. All right, everyone, that's a good place to end this. Jérôme, you got to control the button there. Hit and end this thing.